10,000 years before Titus, another hero of Ultramar changed the fate of the galaxy forever. Demigods walked among men, humanity ruled the stars, a golden age of conquest and glory. But then, treachery struck. Brother turned against brother. The galaxy burned. Amidst this chaos, one space marine stood apart. His name? Aeonid Thiel, censured for his radical ideas, yet destined to reshape what it means to be Ultramarine. From the inferno of Calth to the hallowed halls of Macragge, Thiel's story is one of defiance, innovation, and raw survival. Before we begin, be sure to like this video to help the algorithm. With that being said, this is the tale of Aeonid Thiel, a crucial piece of Warhammer 40,000 history. His actions during the Horus Heresy would influence Space Marine doctrine for millennia to come. The acrid smell of burning promethium and the metallic tang of blood filled the air as Aeonid Thiel ducked behind the shattered remains of a hab block. Bolter fire ricocheted off the crumbling ferrocrete, sending chips of debris raining down on his scarlet helm. The distinctive red stood out among the sea of ultramarine blue, a mark of censure that now seemed as irrelevant as the broken world around him. Calth burned. The once verdant agri-world had been transformed into a hellscape of fire and treachery. Thiel's enhanced hearing picked up the screams of the dying, both civilian and Astartes, a cacophony of despair that threatened to overwhelm even his transhuman senses. Through the haze of smoke and ash, he could make out the twisted spires of what had once been majestic hive cities, now reduced to skeletal remnants, reaching accusingly towards the poisoned sky. He risked a glance around the corner, his augmented eyes quickly assessing the battlefield. A squad of word-bearers advanced relentlessly, their armor adorned with unholy sigils that seemed to writhe and twist in the smoky air. The symbols pulsed with an otherworldly energy that made Thiel's skin crawl beneath his ceramite plate. He noted their formation, a modified pincer movement that left their center exposed. But Aeonid Thiel had never been one for orthodoxy. With a thought, he activated his Vox speed. "Rubio, I need a distraction. Southeast corner, 50 meters. Can you manage it?" There was a moment of static before a strained voice replied. "I'll do what I can, brother, but be quick. The warp whispers grow stronger by the minute." Thiel nodded, though his battle brother couldn't see the gesture. He took a deep breath, centering himself as he had done countless times before. The weight of his bolter was comforting in his hands, a constant in a universe gone mad. He ran a quick diagnostic through his armor's machine spirit, confirming all systems were operational despite the battering they'd taken. Suddenly, the air shimmered with psychic energy. The word-bearers faltered, their movements becoming erratic as Tylos Rubio's psychic assault battered their minds. Thiel didn't hesitate. He burst from cover, his movements a blur of superhuman speed and precision. Instead of charging headlong into the enemy, he sprinted parallel to their line, unleashing a barrage of bolt rounds into their exposed flanks. The traitors, their attention divided between Rubio's psychic onslaught and Thiel's unexpected maneuver, were caught in a deadly crossfire. 3 fell before they could even turn to face this new threat, their corrupted power armor offering little protection against Thiel's well-placed shots. The stench of burnt flesh and ruptured organs added to the battlefield's miasma. As he fought, memories of his censure flashed through Thiel's mind. He saw again the disapproving faces of his superiors during training exercises, heard their voices thick with disappointment and frustration. "The Codex Astartes does not support this action, Brother Thiel," they would say, their tones a mixture of exasperation and barely concealed anger. He remembered the weight of the red helm as it was first placed upon his head, a mark of shame that he had worn as a badge of defiance. But here, in the crucible of real combat, with the fate of Ultramar hanging in the balance, Thiel knew his unorthodox methods were saving lives. Each traitor that fell to his bolter was one less threat to his battle brothers, to the civilians they were sworn to protect. He vaulted over a fallen pillar, using it as cover to reload his weapon with practiced efficiency. As the last word-bearer crumpled to the ground, his chest a smoking ruin, Thiel allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction. He quickly reloaded, his movements practiced and efficient. before scanning the area for his next target. The battlefield was a tapestry of destruction, burning vehicles, shattered buildings, and the fallen of both sides littering the ground. "Well done, brother," Rubio's voice crackled over the vox. The librarian emerged from the smoke, his armor scorched and his face drawn with fatigue. Psychic lightning still crackled around his fingertips. "Though I fear we've only scratched the surface of this betrayal." Thiel grunted in agreement, clasping Rubio's forearm in a warrior's grip. "Your mind assault was perfectly timed. We make a formidable team, brother." Rubio managed a weary smile. "The old ways have their place, but your adaptability, it's what we need in these dark times." Their moment of camaraderie was cut short as a massive explosion bloomed on the horizon, its mushroom cloud a stark reminder of the scale of destruction they faced. The shockwave rolled over them seconds later, carrying with it a wave of debris and the screams of the dying. "Throne of Terra," Rubio breathed, his eyes wide with horror. "They've detonated the atomic pile in Hive Androcus. Millions." Thiel's jaw clenched, his hand tightening on his bolter. "We need to regroup and assess our options. This is no longer just a battle, it's a fight for survival." As they moved through the ruined cityscape, Thiel's mind churned with questions and half-formed strategies. How had it come to this? Astartes turning against Astartes, brother slaying brother in a galactic civil war that threatened to tear the Imperium apart. The scale of the betrayal was almost beyond comprehension. He thought of Horus, the once beloved war master, now the architect of this madness. What could have turned him against the Emperor, against everything they had fought to build? Thiel had never met the Primarch of the Luna Wolves, but he had heard tales of his charisma, his tactical brilliance. To think that such a figure could fall so far. As they approached the rendezvous point, a half-collapsed manufactorum that still bore the scars of orbital bombardment, Thiel saw more of his brothers gathering. Some were wounded, all were battle-worn, but in their eyes, he saw the same unbreakable resolve. They were Ultramarines, sons of Guilliman, and they would not falter in the face of this betrayal. Thiel took a moment to survey his brothers, noting their injuries and the state of their equipment. He felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. These warriors looked to him for guidance, despite the red helm that marked him as censured. In this moment of crisis, old reprimands and bureaucratic punishments seemed trivial. "Brothers," he began, his voice carrying the authority of one born to lead. "We face a threat unlike any we have encountered before. Our own kindred have turned against us, using their intimate knowledge of our tactics and defenses to strike at our very heart." He paused, letting his words sink in. The faces before him were grim but attentive. In the distance, the rumble of artillery and the scream of jet engines provided a constant reminder of the battle raging around them. "But we are Ultramarines. Adaptability is in our blood." Guilliman himself praised the ability to think critically, to assess each situation on its own merits. Today, we put that principle to the test. Thiel proceeded to outline a series of unconventional strategies, drawing on the lessons he had learned through years of pushing the boundaries of accepted doctrine. He spoke of hit-and-run tactics, of using the enemy's expectations against them, of combining their strengths in unexpected ways. As he spoke, he could see the doubt in some eyes slowly give way to understanding, even excitement. Rubio stepped forward, adding his own insights. The librarian spoke of how his psychic abilities could be integrated into these new tactics, providing cover, disruption, and reconnaissance in ways that traditional methods couldn't match. The air around him crackled with suppressed power as he demonstrated, creating illusory duplicates of himself that flickered and danced around the gathered Astartes. As the impromptu briefing concluded, Thiel felt a surge of pride in his brothers. They had listened, understood, and were ready to implement these new ideas without hesitation. This was the true strength of the Ultramarines, not blind adherence to doctrine, but the ability to adapt and overcome. "For Ultramar and the Emperor," Thiel said, raising his bolter high. The assembled Astartes roared in response, their voices carrying over the sound of distant battle. The cry echoed off the ruined buildings, a defiant challenge to the traitors who sought to destroy all they held dear. As they moved out, breaking into smaller teams to carry out their assigned tasks, Thiel felt a mix of emotions churning within him. There was anger at the betrayal they faced, determination to see this conflict through, but also a glimmer of hope. Perhaps in the crucible of this heresy, the Ultramarines would emerge stronger, more flexible, better prepared for the challenges that lay ahead. He thought of Guilliman, their Primarch, and wondered how he was faring in this madness. Would he approve of these tactics, this departure from established norms? Or would Thiel face further censure when, if, they survived this ordeal? For now, such concerns were secondary. Calth burned around them, and the fate of Ultramar hung in the balance. Thiel pushed his doubts aside, focusing on the task at hand. He had been given a chance to prove the worth of his ideas, to show that innovation and adaptability had a place even among the proudly traditional Ultramarines. As he led his team through the ruins of what had once been a thriving city, now a maze of twisted metal and shattered dreams, Thiel vowed to make the most of this opportunity. Not for his own glory, but for the survival of his brothers, the protection of Ultramar, and the future of the Imperium itself. The battle for Calth had only just begun, and with it perhaps a new chapter in the history of the Ultramarines. Whatever the outcome, Aeonid Thiel was determined to face it head on, with all the courage, intellect, and adaptability he could muster. For in the grim darkness of this new future, such qualities might mean the difference between victory and annihilation. The void of space, normally a realm of silent, cold beauty, now churned with the fury of war. Aeonid Thiel stood on the bridge of the Ultramarine strike cruiser, Sword of Macragge, his red helm tucked under his arm as he gazed out at the battlefield before him. The viewport was a canvas of destruction, painted with streaking lance fire, blossoming explosions, and the debris of shattered vessels. The bridge hummed with activity, servitors and crew working in perfect synchronization to keep the mighty vessel operational. Cogitators chattered incessantly, processing vast amounts of tactical data. The acrid smell of overheated circuits mingled with the artificial atmosphere, a stark reminder of the strain the ship was under. Thiel's mind raced, analyzing the ebb and flow of the void combat with the same intensity he applied to ground warfare. Here, in the darkness between stars, the Ultramarines found themselves facing a new kind of challenge. The Wordbearer's fleet had appeared seemingly from nowhere, using some unholy sorcery to bypass the system's early warning arrays. Now, they threatened to overwhelm Calth's orbital defenses and rain destruction upon the planet below. "Brother Captain," a voice cut through Thiel's contemplation. He turned to see Tylos Rubio approaching, the librarian's face drawn with concentration. Psychic energy crackled around Rubio's temples, a testament to the strain of maintaining his abilities in the midst of battle. "The enemy vessels are adopting a pincer formation. They seek to divide our forces." Thiel nodded, a plan already forming in his mind. "Thank you, Rubio. Your foresight serves us well." He turned to the ship's commander, a grizzled veteran named Tiberius. Scars crisscrossed the captain's face, each telling a tale of battles won and lost across the stars. "Captain, I have a suggestion, if you'll hear it." Tiberius raised an eyebrow, but gestured for Thiel to continue. The red helm might mark him as censured, but Thiel's reputation had grown since the ground battle on Calth began. "The enemy expects us to react conventionally, to split our forces to counter their pincer movement," Thiel began, his voice calm but intense. He manipulated the hololithic display, highlighting key positions in the unfolding battle. "Instead, I propose we concentrate our fleet into a spear formation. We'll drive straight for the center of their line, using our heaviest ships as a battering ram." Tiberius frowned, his augmetic eye whirring as it processed the tactical overlay. "That would leave our flanks exposed. The risk is calculated," Thiel interrupted smoothly. "Brother Rubio, if you would." The librarian stepped forward, his eyes glowing with psychic energy. The air around him seemed to distort, reality bending to his will. "I can create a psychic shroud around our rear ships," he explained. "It won't last long, but it should confuse their targeting augers long enough for us to punch through their center." Thiel watched as Tiberius mulled over the plan. He could almost see the gears turning in the captain's mind, weighing orthodoxy against necessity. The bridge fell silent, save for the constant hum of machinery and the distant thunder of weapons fire. Finally, Tiberius nodded. "Very well, Brother Thiel. We'll try it your way." He turned to his command staff, barking orders to reconfigure the fleet. "May the Emperor protect us all." As the Ultramarine vessels began to shift into the new formation, Thiel felt a familiar mix of anticipation and doubt. His strategies had proven effective on the ground, but void warfare was a different beast entirely. If he was wrong, if his calculations were off by even a fraction, the cost would be measured in thousands of lives. The minutes stretched like hours as the two fleets drew closer. Thiel could feel the tension on the bridge, the coiled energy of warriors preparing for battle. He glanced at Rubio, saw the sheen of sweat on the librarian's brow as he focused his psychic might. "Now," Thiel said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. The Ultramarines' fleet surged forward as one, a blue armored fist driving towards the heart of the enemy formation. For a moment, it seemed the word-bearers were caught off guard, their flanking units slow to react to this unexpected maneuver. Then all hell broke loose. The void lit up with weapon fire, shields flaring as they absorbed punishing blows. Thiel watched, his enhanced senses taking in every detail of the battle. He saw Ultramarine gunners unleashing devastating broadsides, saw word-bearers' vessels crumpling under the concentrated assault. The vacuum of space swallowed the explosions, but the destruction was no less spectacular for its silence. But it wasn't without cost. Alarms blared as enemy fire found its mark, and Thiel felt the deck shudder beneath his feet. He gripped the command railing, his knuckles white beneath his gauntlets. The smell of burning insulation filled the air as power conduits overloaded. "Void shields at 60%, a sensor operator called out. "Hull breaches on decks 7 through 9. "Stay the course," Thiel urged, his voice carrying over the cacophony of battle. "We're almost through." As if in answer to his words, the enemy line buckled. A massive word-bearer's battleship, its hull breached in a dozen places, listed to port. Thiel could see figures being sucked out into the void, their silent screams lost to the emptiness of space. The Ultramarines' fleet poured through the gap, turning to rake the enemy's now exposed flanks with punishing fire. Thiel allowed himself a moment of savage satisfaction as he watched the tide of battle turn. His unorthodox tactic, combined with Rubio's psychic abilities, had achieved what a conventional approach could not. But the cost had been high. The hololithic display showed the icons of fallen Ultramarine vessels, each representing hundreds of lives lost. As the last enemy vessels fled or burned, a cheer went up on the bridge. Thiel felt hands clapping him on the shoulder, heard voices raised in praise of his strategic acumen. But amidst the celebration, a single voice cut through the noise. "Brother Thiel, a word if you please." Thiel turned, his hearts skipping a beat as he recognized the speaker. There, larger than life and radiating an aura of authority that no mortal could match, stood Robut Guilliman, Primarch of the Ultramarines. The demigod's presence seemed to fill the entire bridge, his piercing gaze fixed squarely on Thiel. Time seemed to slow as Thiel approached his genefather. He was acutely aware of every scuff on his armor, every lingering whiff of smoke and ozone that clung to him. The red helm, still tucked under his arm, felt heavier than ever. "My lord," Thiel said, dropping to one knee before the Primarch. The deck felt cold even through his armor. "I take full responsibility for any breach of protocol." "Rise, Aeonid Thiel," Guilliman interrupted, his voice carrying the weight of mountains. "I did not come here to censure you further." Thiel stood, meeting the Primarch's piercing gaze. He saw in those eyes a depth of wisdom and calculation that defied mortal comprehension. For a moment, he felt as though his very soul was being weighed. "Your tactics," Guilliman continued, "both here and on the surface of Calth, have been unconventional, yet undeniably effective." The Primarch paused, his gaze sweeping across the bridge, taking in the aftermath of the battle. "Tell me, brother, how do you reconcile your methods with the tenets of the Codex Astartes?" It was a loaded question, one that Thiel had grappled with for years. He took a breath, choosing his words carefully. "My lord, I believe that the Codex is a foundation, not a constraint. Its principles are sound, but war is chaos. We must be able to adapt, to think beyond the expected if we are to prevail against enemies who know our ways as well as we do." Guilliman's expression remained unreadable, and for a moment, Thiel feared he had overstepped. Then, to his shock, the Primarch's lips curved in the barest hint of a smile. "Well said, Brother Thiel. It seems your censure has taught you diplomacy as well as tactical flexibility." Guilliman's gaze swept the bridge once more, taking in the damage reports scrolling across cogitator screens, the crew working tirelessly to repair battle damage. "I have a task for you, one that will require all of your innovative thinking." As the Primarch outlined the mission, a covert operation deep behind enemy lines, Thiel felt a complex mix of emotions: pride at being chosen, determination to prove himself worthy of the trust, and a gnawing uncertainty about what this meant for his future within the Legion. But as he listened to Guilliman's words, as he began to grasp the scope of the challenge before him, Thiel felt something else stirring in his hearts. A sense of purpose, of rightness. Here, in this moment of galactic upheaval, his unique perspectives were not just tolerated, but needed. As the briefing concluded, Thiel squared his shoulders, his resolve hardening. Whatever trials lay ahead, whatever enemies he would face, he would meet them with all the courage, cunning, and adaptability he possessed. For in this new age of betrayal and war, it would take more than blind adherence to doctrine to secure victory. It would take warriors willing to think differently, to push boundaries, to find new ways to uphold the ideals of the Imperium. And Aeonid Thiel, with his red helm and unconventional tactics, was ready to be such a warrior. As he left the bridge to prepare for his new mission, he cast one last glance at the stars beyond the view screen. The void of space, once a realm of cold beauty, now seemed alive with possibility and danger. The galaxy was changing, and Aeonid Thiel was determined to change with it, for the good of the Imperium and the future of mankind. The air in the Strategium was thick with tension, the low hum of cogitators providing a constant backdrop to the heated discussion. Aeonid Thiel stood before a hololithic display of Ultramar, his eyes tracing the web of battle lines and fleet movements that crisscrossed the sector. The three-dimensional map pulsed with a cold blue light, casting stark shadows across the faces of those gathered around it. Around him, a cadre of senior officers argued, their voices rising and falling like the tide of war itself. The chamber, nestled deep within the fortress monastery on Macragge, bore the scars of recent conflict. Hastily repaired walls and the acrid smell of burnt electronics, a stark reminder of how close the enemy had come. "The Codex Astartes has served us well for centuries," intoned Captain Severus, his weathered face set in stubborn lines. The veteran's armor was adorned with numerous honors, each one a testament to his unwavering adherence to tradition. To alter it now, in the midst of this conflict, invites chaos and disorder. Thiel felt the weight of expectation settle on his shoulders. He had come so far since his days as a censured sergeant, yet the specter of that red helm still lingered. He took a deep breath, centering himself before speaking. "With respect, brother captain," Thiel said, his voice calm but intense. "It is precisely because we are in conflict that we must adapt." He manipulated the hololithic display, zooming in on a recent engagement. "Our enemies know our doctrines as well as we do. They anticipate our every move. If we are to prevail, we must evolve." The image shifted, showing a pitched battle on one of Ultramar's frontier worlds. Here, at the Battle of Asphodex's Gates, we employed the new flanking maneuver. It caught the word-bearers completely off guard, allowing us to break their lines with minimal casualties. A murmur ran through the assembled officers. Thiel could see the conflict in their eyes, the ingrained respect for tradition warring with the undeniable results of innovation. Some nodded in grudging agreement, while others frowned, their minds still resisting change. And what of the risks? This from Chaplain Cassius, his skull helm gleaming in the low light. The spiritual leader's voice carried the weight of centuries of tradition. The Codex is more than tactics, Thiel. It is the foundation of our identity as Ultramarines. Tamper with it, and you risk unraveling everything we stand for. Thiel nodded, acknowledging the chaplain's concerns. I understand, Chaplain, but I would argue that our identity is not found in rigid adherence to doctrine, but in our commitment to duty, honor, and the protection of the Imperium. He paused, gathering his thoughts. Think of it as pruning a tree. We're not uprooting our traditions, but carefully shaping them to grow stronger, to bear more fruit. The room fell silent as the officers considered his words. Thiel could almost see the wheels turning in their minds. Centuries of indoctrination, grappling with the harsh realities of a galaxy at war. It was then that a new voice spoke, one that sent a ripple of reverence through the room. Well said, Brother Thiel. All heads turned as Robute Guilliman entered the Strategium, his presence filling the space like a sun going supernova. The Primarch's eyes swept the room, taking in the tension, the uncertainty, and the glimmers of hope.
The Codex Astartes is not a set of shackles, Guilliman said, his voice resonating with authority. He moved to stand beside the hololithic display, his massive frame dwarfing even the other Astartes. It was never meant to be. It is a foundation upon which to build, a framework to guide us, but it must also be flexible enough to meet the challenges of a changing galaxy. He moved to stand beside Thiel, laying a hand on the Space Marine's shoulder. The gesture sent a jolt through Thiel, not just of pride, but of a profound sense of responsibility.
Aeonid Thiel has shown us the value of adaptive thinking, Guilliman continued. His tactics have saved countless lives and secured vital victories. It is time we incorporate this flexibility into the Codex itself.
The Primarch turned to address the entire room. We will review and revise the Codex Astartes, not to discard our traditions, but to refine them, to create a doctrine that honors our past while preparing us for the future. As Guilliman outlined his vision for the new Codex, Thiel felt a mix of emotions washing over him. Pride in having his ideas validated, certainly, but also a deep sense of humility and purpose. This was larger than him, larger than any individual Space Marine. This was about forging a path forward for the entire Adeptus Astartes.
The next several months were a whirlwind of activity. Thiel found himself at the heart of the revision process, working closely with Guilliman and a select group of officers to refine and expand the Codex. Every battle, every engagement became a testing ground for new tactics and strategies. It wasn't always smooth sailing. There were heated debates, moments of frustration when tradition and innovation clashed. Thiel often found himself serving as a bridge between the old guard and the new, translating abstract concepts into practical applications. One particularly memorable moment came during a field test of a new rapid deployment doctrine. Thiel stood atop a ridgeline on a war-torn world, the sky above streaked with the contrails of drop pods and gunships. He watched as squads of Ultramarines executed a series of complex maneuvers, their movements a fluid dance of superhuman precision. Beside him, Tylos Rubio observed with his psychic senses, attuned to the ebb and flow of the exercise. The librarian's eyes glowed with ethereal energy, his brow furrowed in concentration. "It's beautiful," Rubio said softly, his voice filled with wonder. "I can feel the harmony, the way each warrior moves in concert with his brothers. It's like a symphony of war."
Thiel nodded, feeling a swell of pride. "It's not just about being unpredictable to our enemies," he mused. "It's about maximizing our potential, about using every tool at our disposal to protect the Imperium."
Rubio turned to him, a rare smile crossing his features. "You've come a long way from that censured sergeant, my friend. You should be proud."
Before Thiel could respond, an alarm blared across the training grounds. What had been a controlled exercise suddenly became all too real as a word-bearer strike force decloaked on the far side of the valley. The air shimmered with unholy energies as the traitors materialized, their armor adorned with blasphemous sigils. In that moment, everything Thiel had worked for was put to the ultimate test. He watched, heart pounding, as the Ultramarine squads smoothly transitioned from training to true combat. They adapted on the fly, using the new doctrines not as rigid instructions, but as a framework for creative problem-solving.
The battle was fierce, but brief. Bolter fire lit up the darkening sky, and the clash of ceramite against ceramite echoed across the valley. The word-bearers, expecting to catch the Ultramarines in a vulnerable moment, found themselves outmaneuvered and overwhelmed. Thiel himself joined the fray, his tactical insights guiding the counterattack. As the last enemy fell, a cheer went up from the Ultramarine lines, not just for the victory, but for the vindication of their new approach. Thiel stood amidst his brothers, his armor stained with the blood of traitors, feeling a profound sense of accomplishment.
In the aftermath, as the smoke cleared and the wounded were tended to, Thiel found a moment of quiet reflection. He thought back to his days as a maverick sergeant, to the weight of that red helm. He thought of the long journey that had brought him here, of the lives lost and the lessons learned.
And he realized that this moment of transformation, of growth, was what it truly meant to be an Ultramarine. Not blind obedience, but reasoned adaptation. Not rigid doctrine, but a living, breathing approach to warfare that could meet any challenge.
As the sun set over the bloodied training grounds, Aeonid Thiel allowed himself a small smile. The Codex Astartes was changing, evolving, and with it, the Ultramarines were becoming something new, something more formidable than ever before. In that moment, Thiel knew that whatever challenges the galaxy might throw at them, the Sons of Guilliman would be ready. Not because they had all the answers, but because they had learned to ask the right questions, to adapt, to overcome, and to emerge stronger from every trial.
The future was uncertain, the galaxy in turmoil. But Aeonid Thiel and his brothers would face it with open minds and indomitable wills, guided by a codex that embraced both tradition and innovation. And in doing so, they would write a new chapter in the legend of the Ultramarines, one of resilience, adaptability, and unwavering devotion to the Imperium of Man.
As Thiel made his way back to the command center, his mind already racing with new ideas and refinements, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The journey was far from over, but with each step, the Ultramarines were forging a path that would shape the future of the Adeptus Astartes for millennia to come. In the grim darkness of the far future, where there is only war, the Sons of Guilliman would stand as a beacon of hope and strength, their tactics as sharp as their blades, their minds as strong as their faith. And at the forefront of this new era stood Aeonid Thiel, once censured, now revered, forever an Ultramarine.